This is part 1 of a series about NZG's Liebherr LTM 11200 mobile crane model, and this part deals with the assembly of the base model. We will start by unpacking it, and it comes in a fairly large cardboard outer carton, and inside that is a Liebherr branded sleeve which encloses some polystyrene trays. Now, this particular model has been previously unpacked and built up, so the unpacking we'll see here isn't quite the same as if you had a brand new model out of the box. The box has photos of both the real machine and the model, but there's no information about the real machine on the box, and it would have been good to have had a DVD or something about the real crane. There is a comprehensive instruction sheet, and we'll look at that in a bit more detail later, but we'll start by having a look at the parts in the various trays. The top tray has the counterweight plate, outrigger pads and spreader plates. The superlift guy ropes are normally in the top tray, but they've already been fitted to the boom. The second tray has counterweights and hooks, the lattice mast and heavy lift head and other small parts. The bottom tray contains the heavy end of the model, and that includes the carrier and the boom. It is easy enough to lift out the main parts of the model, and we'll start with the carrier. You just need to be a little bit careful because it is a heavy piece, so you need to grab onto something solid, and so just avoid touching the door mirrors or any of the other weaker parts. The boom is another very heavy part, so again, be careful getting it out, just hold it very tightly, don't drop it because it will cause some spectacular damage. The instruction sheet with the model is really pretty good. It's printed in both German and in English, and it's got large diagrams with clear text. It doesn't cover every detail of the model and every part that has to be assembled, but they are easy and straightforward enough for anybody to be able to follow. Five possible versions of the model can be assembled, and for this video we'll build up the largest of the 5 with the lattice mast. We'll start with the main boom, and if the model's new out of the box you do have to fit the guy ropes onto the superlift arrangement. The guy ropes are the silver parts shown here, and they've already been fitted to the boom, and they are connected using small nuts and bolts using the special tools supplied, and we'll show more about how to use those later. We need to attach the main boom to the carrier, so the best way to do that is just to gently push it into position at the pivot point, and being careful not to scratch the paint or anything like that. And when it's more or less in position, you can then use perhaps a pointed tool just to push through the holes to make sure that the holes are lined up so that the bolts can be pushed in, which secures the boom to the carrier. 2 large metal bolts are supplied, and as long as the holes are lined up then it should be easy enough to push them in without using too much force. And there's one that goes in on either side of the boom. Now, the whole weight of the boom will be resting on these pins, so it's going to be quite a force, and NZG have produced a good little bit of model engineering, which is to supply some locking washers that just fit over the end of the bolts, and they clip into place so that the bolts are secured and can't spring free. With the boom secured at the pivot point, the next thing to do is to fit the top of the 2 hydraulic rams to the boom, and if you get the cylinders lined up as I've got them shown here, then you just screw into the top of the pistons, and there are special large headed screws that you use to make this connection, and you just tighten them up with a standard screwdriver. And when it's all fixed together, you can see that just the weight of the boom itself will push the piston into the cylinder, and it goes down to a horizontal position. With the 2 pistons screwed into place, the boom is attached to the carrier. The next operation is to pull out the outriggers and fit the pads to the end. The outrigger beams just pull out from the side of the carrier, and they are telescopic, so you can set them at various distances. And to lower the pistons you just unscrew them, and then they just gradually lower from the end of the outrigger beam. This is engineered very well because you can't see the screw thread that's hidden inside the top of the outrigger beam, and it does produce a very strong connection, so these outriggers will hold the weight of the whole model. Metal outrigger pads are provided which go on the end of the pistons, and they are locked into place with little pins that just go through holes in the pads and through the end of the pistons so that they stay on, and then you can actually turn the piston and you can see the pad turning there. Don't do it too fast, otherwise the pin will fly out. One good aspect here is that the pad could be shown up off the ground, so you could display the model as if it was being just transported locally on site with the outrigger pads attached. The next operation is to fit the counterweight base plate, and that's best done over the edge of a table because you need to insert a little screw into two positions in the counterweight base plate, and they screw up into the underside of the body, so you need to be able to get underneath in order to position the screws correctly and then do them up with a screwdriver. Having said that, this method does produce a strong connection of the plate to the underside of the crane, and bearing in mind the weight it's going to support, that's reassuring. You can now put the crane into the position you want to display it, and to do that you can put the outrigger pads onto the heavy metal base plates that are supplied, and these are another good addition to the model. Now we're ready to load up the ballast plates onto the counterweight base plate, and they're all separate pieces, nicely made, heavy metal too, and they just slot into place in the appropriate positions on the base plates, and they kind of lock into position, which is good, so they're not prone to being falling off or being easily knocked off. And you then just keep loading up the counterweight base plate with all the available pieces, and here we're showing it being fully loaded with all the ballast plates that come with the model. We are now ready to raise the boom, and we can do that just by lifting up on the end and making sure that you hold the carrier down at the same time, because the cylinders are pretty stiff, so you do need to apply really a reasonable degree of force to get the boom up to a fairly vertical position. However, under load the hydraulic cylinders won't hold the boom in position, so you really need to put pins into the cylinders to lock the boom in place. We can now add some detailing to the model, and the first is the exhaust pipe, which actually isn't mentioned in the instructions, and that just clips in place. And then there are some metal handrails which fit, and these just fix into place. One thing to notice though is that the ends of the superlift arrangement do clash with the handrails a little bit, so the thing to do is just to open up the superlift a bit and then clip the handrails into place. You fit a pair on both sides of the crane, and then there are a couple of small pieces which clip in right adjacent to the sides of the boom. These are slightly more fiddly to get in place. And then there are just a couple of access ladders to fit in place. One is a vertical ladder which just pushes down and clips in at the top, and on the opposite side of the carrier is another ladder which is a sloping ladder, and that just pushes in to the side of the body. Now we're ready to attach the lattice mast to the top of the boom head, and that just fits into place, and you just need to line the holes up as accurately as you can to get the bolts in. Now this is a precision model, so the connections are made by very tiny little brass nuts and bolts, and you get special tools which to use, so the nut fits into a special holder, and then you can tighten the bolt directly into the nut to make the connection. Now this is high quality model engineering which is a pleasure to use. The only downside of course is that the parts are very small, so you have to be careful not to drop them on the floor because they're easily lost. So just to illustrate a connection being made, here's the tool being put over the nut, and use the other tool onto the bolt head and then just turn it, and that screws the bolt into the nut and actually produces a good strong connection. With the lattice mast attached, we can fit the Y-guy superlift arrangement on, and you just unhook the pulley from its holder and join it from the pendant bar that comes from the lattice mast, and when you've got it in position and the holes lined up, you just use the brass bolts and a nut and your special tools, and again you form a pretty strong connection between the two. So we're finally getting near the end now, and the mast is fully attached to the top of the boom, and the last thing to do is to fit the hook. To pull the rope off the drum, you need to disengage the positive brake that the drum has, and the best way to do that is perhaps with your thumb, push it in a bit, and then you can just pull the rope as much as you want off the drum, and then run it up and over the boom top, and then between the two pulleys that are on the lattice mast. And when that's done, it's then just up and over the top of the lattice mast, and then you can reeve up the hook with as many falls of rope as you want, and then tie the hook off. And as with all weaving operations, you just have to be a bit patient and careful, and when you're done, trim the end of the rope off to get a good looking job. So finally, we've completed the assembly of the model in this particular configuration, which is handily known as T7YVENZF. That completes part 1 of this video series, and part 2 looks at the detail and features of the base model.